A very hot topic. A hot topic. Birth control. What led to the sexual revolution of the 1960s? Was it that we gave women an inch and they took a mile? No, not even close. By the 1960s, a lot of men had fought for women to have rights, such as the right to vote. A lot of men did this. When we want to talk about rape and murder, the keynote that we leave out of all of that is alcohol. Over half of all murders are committed by people who are drunk. Over half of all murder victims are drunk. Nearly all campus rapes involve alcohol with both parties. Nearly all of them. We live in the modern age of consent. I grew up in the 80s when a lot of this stuff that you're using now as commonplace was just seeding. They were just starting to test some of these fucked up concepts that have destroyed this goddamn planet. But what was going on in the 80s? Well, this was 20 years of women's sexual revolution. Now they can go out and have sex with whoever they want like men do. Really, those men have to find a consensual partner. Otherwise, it's rape. So when you want to go blaming all of this on men, oh, well, men being out there being all promiscuous, who are they being promiscuous with? There are women involved in that too. There always have been. The oldest trade on planet Earth, as far as human beings go, the oldest trade that we have, it's not bricklaying, it's not carpentry, it's sex. Prostitution is the oldest trade. It does not have to be for money. Prostitution predates money. In reality, prostitution comes down to consent by trade. Many of us know women who were desperate enough to have sex with guys that they weren't interested in, and they feel sorry for themselves because they settled for this guy for the time being because he has a roof over his head. He's got a good job. 80% of consumer purchases and purchasing decisions are made by women. Do you know what men primarily buy? My mom and my stepdad both had very different spending habits. My mom spent my stepdad's money on herself. She spent her money on herself. Scott, my stepdad, spent his money on making sure that the bills were paid. Anything that my mom didn't spend anyway, he spent to make sure that the bills were paid. He spent to make sure there was food in the house. When he was there, there was food in the house. When Michael Scott Wade was home, my mom always had food in the house because Scott made sure there was food. Scott was a working man. He got hungry. You might not think of being an electrician as a hard job, but you know what? It's a lot of flexing and bending and moving, and sure, that's good for you, but not being stuck like that for hours on end, for years on end sometimes. Going through the tunnels at the sugar factory. Yeah, I know that makes it sound crazy, but yeah, there's tunnels at the sugar factory, and there's people whose job is to go through these tunnels. They're just conduit. The only thing in these fucking things is conduit, and it's specially made so there's no sparks or anything like that because, not sure if you knew this, but sugar is explosive. It's flammable, highly flammable. If you mix sugar with quick lime and water, you don't get a good mixture. And it only takes a little bit of water. And there's a lot of stuff that guys spend their money on, a lot of things like tools. And why did you need this tool and why did you need that tool? Well, let me explain it to you. Between spending $400 to hire somebody else who owns a drill to come in and screw anything in that needs to be screwed in and doing it yourself, it's a lot easier to do those things yourself. Some of you have boyfriends or husbands who are idiots who didn't learn anything about building anything and they don't know what they're doing. There's also people who are probably very good at building things, but it's impossible to get anything done or to think the project through when you've got somebody nagging at you the whole fucking time. Give me some peace and quiet so I can get my job done. There was one job I went to, the lady wanted to talk to me the whole time. She hired me through Labor Ready. And I got there, and yeah, she wanted the work done, but more importantly, she wanted somebody to talk to. She was lonely, and she was willing to pay for company a lot of money to Labor Ready to have somebody show up to do yard work and, things that just little handiwork around the house. But then she wanted to talk literally the whole day. And, by the end of the first day, I told her, hey, ma'am, I got to get some work done. If I don't get the project done, then Labor Ready asks me why, and it doesn't look good on me. I understand that you want to, come out and tell me all of your personal. Well, I was a lot more tactful than that, but basically, I understand you want to tell me all of your personal stuff, but I have to stop what I'm doing to listen to you so that I can give you my full attention. So, I hope this doesn't come down as a bad mark on me, but you told Labor Ready it was going to be a 5-hour job, and I've been here for 8. So I have to go back to Labor Ready and explain to them why I'm late, and I have to explain to them, what happened and why. And the thing is, the lady did understand the first day, and she called them up and said, hey, I want to pay for the other 3 hours that he was here, and I want him to come back tomorrow and finish the job. I think he did a great job. And the second day, she did the same thing. And at the end of the day, I didn't explain it to her. I just got my signature on the piece of paper. I went back to Labor Ready, and I turned in my money. And Nicole, the lady who was running, she said, that lady called. She wasn't very happy because you didn't finish the job yesterday and you didn't finish the job today. I said, ma'am, she talks a lot. It's impossible to get anything done when she talks a lot. She said, yeah, I know. We send people out there from time to time, and they all say the same thing. It's impossible to get anything done because she just comes out and talks to them all day. Wants to offer them tea, ask them if they want sugar in their tea or not. Would you like to eat lunch? Do you want breakfast before you get started? Would you like a beer? She was she was very nice, but the work wasn't getting done, and it's difficult to get into it when you've got somebody who is constantly pestering you. And sure, you're just trying to be nice, but for Christ's sake, stop being nice and find something to do so I can do my job. Then there's people who don't know anything about construction that want to micromanage projects. There was a lady once through Labor Ready. She wanted a section of her porch fixed. And I was sent out. Me and Mobley were both sent out to this lady's job, by the way. The first time, Mobley went out there and he explained to her that he couldn't do it. Yes, he's a carpenter, but what Labor Ready sent him out there for is you said that there was a cement post that was rotted out and you needed the cement post out. Well, it's not a cement post. It's just a cement block that the corner post that's holding up your deck is attached to. And it's got a little bit of weather damage. It's called graying, and it's not a bad thing. You put on a coat of lacquer, and it'll stop it immediately. You won't have that problem again for probably 3 to 5 years. But what she wanted was the whole thing out of there, and she wanted that post set up so that it was at a certain way with no nails. She was very adamant about no nails, no nails, no nails. I said, well, what about screws? She said, no, we can't use screws either. She wanted the a 2x4, just a pine 2x4 to lean up against this cedar stuff, and that the pressure of it was going to hold it out. But what she wanted was the railing to go in like this, and she wanted this structural member underneath to not be there. She wanted to have a floating porch. I'm like, oh my God, ma'am, here's the thing. Your porch isn't going to float. All right, you're going to need some severely large steel structural members nearly the entire length of this that go into your house, that are bolted to your house, going nearly all the way through your house, because your house is going to be the counterweight for that big ass fucking porch that you have. I mean, this thing isn't the biggest, but you could easily fit 5 or 6 cars on it. You know, it's if you took the rails off and put a ramp on it. So, I mean, it's not huge, but it's still pretty big. When you don't know anything about construction and you want to micromanage something and you have this idea in your head that is fucking fantasy, and you want a person from Labor Ready, one person from Labor Ready, to show up and turn your pre-existing porch into a floating porch with physics that don't exist. Okay, here's the important part. Physics that don't exist. I understood what she wanted to do with her railing, but it was just going to fall off. Well, fall in. I understood what she was saying about the corners meshing up. I understood that, how they won't want to fall in because they're matched up at 90 degrees on the corner. But they weren't 90 degrees on the corner. And you can't have a floating porch if it wasn't designed and built to be a floating porch. It's like having a huge balcony. Imagine a balcony big enough to fit 5 or 6 vehicles on. That's your balcony. Now imagine if that was just made out of cedar coming out of the side of your wall. Nothing underneath it, just coming straight out of your wall. Your house is not going to hold that. It's not structurally able to hold it. She had this idea that she bought these like 4-inch bolts, you know, and we were going to be able to bolt these into the cedar that's right up against the cement. So I'd have to drill a bunch of holes. I'd have to get underneath this thing and drill a whole bunch of holes. And I'm like, the whole structure is maybe a foot off the ground. That includes the cement thing that each of these posts are sitting on. It's not like it's a huge thing. And then after you put those in there, you got to explain to the lady, hey, cedar is really soft. Those bolts, even though you didn't get washers, even if you got huge washers to help to hold it against the wall, wood is soft. It's going to immediately start sagging once you start taking the posts out that are around the edge. That is the only thing holding it up. Now, we're not supposed to treat all women like all women are like that, right? I agree. I wholeheartedly agree. There are some people that paid attention, and there's some people that didn't. Now, the sexual revolution from the 1960s came about very specifically because of birth control. Now, women could be as promiscuous as men. No. Men were not any more promiscuous. Heterosexual men were not any more promiscuous than heterosexual women at the time. Do you know why? Because you had to have a partner. Now, when you guys want to push the rape thing, well, what about rape? Well, rape is wrong. I agree with that. But when we're talking about consensual sex, as heterosexuals. Women were not having more sex than men. Some women were having a lot more sex than a lot of women. Some men were having a lot more sex than a lot of men. But even then, we projected everything onto men, didn't we? Now we had a situation where previously it was very much to a woman's benefit to stay with a single partner and to have offspring from that particular partner. Now, back then, without the DNA sequencing testing and all that we have today, it wasn't as easy to find out if you were the father or not. One of the things that came about is sexually transmitted diseases, and how high promiscuity resulted in the spreading of those diseases so much quicker. So many people ending up with, well, look at the AIDS epidemic. Look how quickly that spread. Nearly every case in America of AIDS can be traced back to a single donor, or at least it could until the mid-90s. Then we started allowing people with AIDS who we knew that had AIDS to actually come to our country and be, well, it was less taboo to have AIDS. By the mid-90s, late 90s, it was more of a, hey, we need to help these people. We really need to help these people. I remember when I was growing up, a lot of people didn't call it AIDS. They called it the gay plague. They wanted to say that it was homosexuals who brought it here and homosexuals who were spreading it, but that was not the case. The case was that you could get it from straight people too. And a lot of people thought, oh, well, I don't do they called it Greek sex at the time. Yeah, even as a kid, I got to hear a lot of this stuff. I grew up in the system, like I said. I knew how to be a foul-mouthed son of a bitch before I knew how to do algebra. Now, the promiscuity from women, that has always been the advancement. For promiscuity from men, it was not any different from men or from women prior to the 1960s. You had to worry about getting a woman pregnant because you were going to have yourself a shotgun wedding if you got somebody pregnant. You were taboo. You were a bad person if you had a baby out of wedlock for a reason. Our society cannot afford to take care of a whole nation of bastards. And I don't mean bastards in a derogatory way. I mean a bunch of kids who don't know who their daddy is. They don't have a positive male role model or influence in their lives, and that is specifically because the mother did not know who the father was or couldn't prove who the father was. Now we can. There's a lot of people older in life who don't want their kids to have a DNA test. They're like, you know what, I'm pretty sure my kid's not mine, but I'd like to believe that my kid is mine because my kid is, 53 or whatever, When your kids are not only grown adults, but they're grandparents now, does it really matter whether or not they share your same genetic line? You love them, don't you? Now, the increased promiscuity from women, this is the gatekeepers for sex, the gatekeepers for children, and that right there was why marriage was so important. Because of the children. Because before the 1960s, there was literally no effective birth control. No, condoms were not effective. If your condom breaks, well, you'd be glad to have birth control. So then we've got a lot of women who are very promiscuous, and that allows a lot of men to be very promiscuous. And of course, we've got the top echelon of people all running around fucking each other. Like, all right, let's imagine every single one of you. I want you to imagine somebody of the gender that you're attracted to. Now, I want you to imagine that there's somebody of that gender who is 300 pounds, is balding, has a pockmarked face, and pimples all over their face. Physically, you may not be attracted to that person. Just because they are of the gender that you are attracted to doesn't mean that you're attracted to their attributes. Even worse, that person might have a terrible attitude. And that makes it even worse. Now, that person, maybe the reason that they're like that is because they've been jaded their whole lives. When that person was younger, maybe he or she was not good looking. Got left out of a lot of things. Maybe that person was small. Maybe there was something about that person that was different enough that they weren't accepted by the people around them. And so they developed an eating disorder. Maybe that eating disorder led to pimples and extra weight. And we take a look at how in the 1960s, when it became a situation where now people didn't have to be in a relationship to have sex to make sure that the children were cared for by a family, instead of it becoming a burden on American society. Because we've seen what our government has done with the burden that was created. They've created all these different services that don't do anything. We've got a whole lot of people who are dependent on the system every single day to make it by. Now, I'm not saying that birth control is a bad thing. What I'm saying is that the sexual regulation has always had to be a decision between two people. When we want to blame everything on men in a situation where women were given sexual freedom because of birth control, this is what gave women sexual freedom. And that in turn is what gave men sexual freedom. But then it still comes down to consent. And are you consenting to the fat and ugly ones, so to speak? Or are you only willing to consent to the top 10% of looks on the other side? If you're a very good looking person who has people throwing themselves at you all the time, back before birth control, you had to be picky and choosy. It was going to be a very scary thing if you got somebody pregnant. A very big deal, something that people in town were going to talk about. Now, when it comes to sex and relationships, women have always been the gatekeepers. Whether or not the door is locked, the man's job, we're taught in a relationship, we're supposed to go up and knock on the door. And whether or not she's inviting or not is up to her. If you ask a woman out, whether she says yes or no, it is her decision. She has the power. It's not a situation where you go and ask her dad. Her dad doesn't have the right to make her decisions for her anymore. Part of that is because the father would have been stuck with the burden if she gets pregnant. That is why that's the way that it used to be. But this day and age, no, you don't have to ask the father. That's just a traditional thing. And she may not have a father to go to, and she may not want to have anything to do with her father. A lot of women that I know, they don't want anything to do with their father because their father was a bad boy. He's into drugs, and sure, he was good looking in his 20s when mom dated him and got pregnant, but he also had the drugs, he had the alcohol, he had the access. But now he's just a sad old alcoholic or a sad old meth addict with no teeth, scrawny and wasting away, picking his face off. Mother's not any better off. It took a lot to stick together back then, same as now. But back then, there was a lot more incentive. Those kids were actually the most important thing. It wasn't this, oh, the government will take care of it, the government will fix it. When I make bad decisions, the government will do it. The government will do this, the government will do that. The family oriented society was created so that it was not a burden upon our society. Because it was so easy to stick a woman with a child, and you can't just do that. You have to think about that child. We all have to think about those children, but we're not, are we? Meanwhile, the gatekeepers, whether or not it's consensual, does come down to a woman. If she does not consent, no means no. That is absolutely what it means. Birth control or not. What birth control did was make it so that women weren't stuck with children, that they didn't know who the father was. But not only that, we got DNA now, so if she does get pregnant, we can find the father, match him up, and make sure that he pays instead of the government having to pay. But then when you look at the money that we spend to make sure that a man pays, it would be a lot easier to spend that money to actually just straight up pay a woman to be a mother. It would be less expensive and less of a burden on our economy to just let her be a mother. It would cost less per month just to pay all of her bills than it would be for us to have her jump through all these services where we have a whole bunch of people who are hired to make everything extremely complicated. Now, this sexual revolution, that was good for a lot of people. There were a lot of good-looking guys out there who all of a sudden could have sex with any woman that they wanted, and they believed that there would be no consequences. It used to be that man trapping would get you a husband for the rest of your life. And our society would shun anybody who got a divorce. Getting a divorce was a very scary thing. Without effective birth control, families were huge. Leaving your wife and 7 to 12 kids was a very major deal back then. But with birth control, now you can be married for 50 years and never get pregnant. There's also the ways that it messes with people's heads. Messing with hormones is not a smart thing. I do know people who, when they were underage, they were angry that they couldn't have a transition. There's one girl, I didn't know her. She was the daughter of a friend, and I'd never met her. I don't even know what she looks like. But she wanted to have a transition with male hormones to become a man when she was like 10 years old. And as an adult, she was angry because she believed, hey, if I'd have been allowed to do that at 10 years old, I'd be buff, I'd be ripped, I'd be muscular. You know, I never would have developed these female parts. But we get to see with the birth control how that's messing with a lot of women's immune systems. It's messing with their abilities to think. And it very much is. It also creates a a lot of health issues and a lot of health risks, a lot of bleeding and a lot of clotting that is not natural, is not healthy for the body. What birth control did was make it so that people who were in relationships weren't going to get pregnant necessarily. Birth control is highly effective. And it also made it so that the people that were the most desired in our society, the ones that were the most sexually desirable to us, that those people who were sexually desirable to most of us, that top tier of either gender, that top tier gets oversexed, gets to be extremely promiscuous in a way that prior to the 1960s they didn't. It became sexual freedom only for the upper class, the upper tier, the upper echelon. Because as we know, money isn't the only driving factor, looks as well. It used to be that when you got somebody pregnant, you had a family to provide for, and that was the family's goal. But now it's this continually upgrading. Oh, well, this man is better looking. That man is better looking. And the grass is always greener on the other side, isn't it? Hey, my man's good looking, but you know what? There's a few times where I didn't get what I wanted. He gets a little less attractive every time I don't get what I want. And that guy there, he's always macking on me. And that guy who's always macking on you, once he's had his conquest, he's going to do the same thing. You're throwing yourselves at people who have options. And then you tell yourself, oh, well, I can throw him away because I have options. And then those of you who have options are constantly destroying each other's lives and then blaming the other gender. Oh. What we created is a welfare society. A society where we have to have welfare. Because why? Because people are still going to get pregnant. There's people who are not going to use the birth control. There's people who are still going to get drunk. And that's where most pregnancies come from, is alcohol. Most pregnancies are not from love. Most of you are not conceived in love. You are conceived in an oxygen-deprived stupor. That is what alcohol does to you. It deprives your brain of oxygen. Obviously, I man bash and woman bash on my channel. Some of my speeches or rants, the only difference between one and another is who I assign it to. When I hear a whole bunch of women bashing, I'll change it over and when I hear a lot of women that I know bashing specifically on men, I'll just change the word men to women when I make my speech. But I also do the same the other way around. Man, woman, don't make any difference. I show the hypocrisy of this sexism. I show how much different it is if somebody does it to me versus if I do it back, or if I just threaten to do it back. I hear men and women having the same complaints, and the funny thing is they're not any different. They just have different opportunities. See, we've got courts who now, instead of basing their situations and decisions on actual reality, they base it on a concept that is a failure, like the Great American Melting Pot. What I was taught was that eventually we're all going to be brown people. I'm fine with that. We need to have different genetics introduced to our genetic line. That way we don't end up with genetic defunctities. Like SETI or Ra. You like that, bringing Egyptian gods into it? That's because a lot of Egyptians believe themselves to be embodiments or gods, and many of them have genetic defunctities. Same thing with the Romanovs many years later, and many people in between. Birth control makes it so that we get to pick and choose who we're selectively having fun with. Now it's not as important a thing to select an important partner, to select a good partner. Now we've got a situation where feminism, women who want to throw themselves at the good-looking guys, they're the gatekeepers. So, of course, when you're throwing yourself at a good-looking guy, you're bringing the door to him. What you're also doing is you're showing your selective breeding process, the ones that you're interested in. And some of them show interest back. The women that I know that are the most promiscuous are the most good-looking. The men that I know who are the most promiscuous are the most good-looking. The reason for this is because of opportunity. They're good-looking enough that basically they have their pick. If I want to have sex with this guy tonight, I can. If I want to have sex with this woman tonight, I can. If I want to throw them away in the morning and get another one, I can. For a lot of the rest of us, I know women who are large who throw themselves out there, really, really throw themselves out there in a very desperate way. Throw themselves at men like they're shooting their vaginas out of cannon at the guy, as Mike Vernon would put it. And most guys don't reciprocate with them. If they do, they don't want to go telling anybody about it. Same thing with a lot of these women who will have pity sex with somebody. Yeah, she'll have pity sex with him, but don't tell anybody. Don't tell anybody. And you can have pity sex now that you got birth control. You're not stuck with that nerd that you felt bad for because he can't get a girl. Or you felt bad for that girl because she was 26 years old and she was a virgin, and you're like, you know what, she's 180 pounds at 5'8", but you know what, she's really nice. She is really nice, and she deserves to not be a virgin for the rest of her life. Every time I hear her talking, almost, she's complaining about being a virgin. And this promiscuity is creating a situation where we've got so many children that don't have positive male role models in their house or in their lives. They know a few decent men whenever their mom wants to move out of another abusive relationship. But other than that, they're being raised by perverts and assholes. Entitled people, getting together with entitled people and making decisions for everyone is never an okay thing. Entitled, good-looking people wanting special rights so that people who are not good-looking will be imprisoned for being attracted to them, or even showing any signs of acknowledging their existence. It's at the point where a man who is not 8 to a 10 on a woman's list has to be afraid to even notice that she exists. If she goes out on the Pearl Street Mall on a sunny day in a mini skirt and a tight bra and covers herself in glitter and wears a bunch of colored flashing bracelets and a flashing bow on top of her head, We have to be afraid that we're going to get treated like we're perverts if we glance even in her direction. We have to actually worry about this as unattractive men, especially if we're broke. That if we look her direction, that we will be treated like we are perverts. You are literally a glitterily flashing fucking light at this point. You are a Christmas tree in the middle of summer. Everyone is going to look at you. Not because they're perverts, because you are flashing like a Christmas tree. You are covered in glitter. When you want to pretend that every motive of a man is sexual, no, that is not true. Men provided for their families for many years. Men. When it comes to women in the workforce, women always had to work. It wasn't until the beginning of the last century that women didn't have to work. Women going into wartime production, that was different. But it was only about 50 to 60 years of women not working. And that women not working became a situation because of an industrial revolution. An electronic or an electric revolution. It used to be that taking care of a family was work. If you were a farm family, you were out in the fields as a wife with your kids and your husband doing that work with him. When we changed over from being an agricultural society to being a urban society, a production society of goods, metal goods, the steel industry, the electronics industry, electric motors, gas motors, oil production. We ended up with centralized networks that needed a lot of logistics to work. Kind of the idea behind only men being able to vote is that there would be one vote per household. It didn't end up being that way, though, did it? I wholeheartedly agree that women should have the right to vote. I believe that women should have the right to be with who they want to, and they should have the right to change their mind, and I believe that so should we. I believe that the word no means no, and I believe that consensual is an important thing to notice. When I was growing up, we were taught things that are being taught today still. Things that turned out to be complete failures. When you're being bullied, you're supposed to tell your bully how it makes you feel and ask him to stop. That doesn't work. Not as a child or as an adult. The next thing you're supposed to do is go to your friends and family. Safety in numbers and all that. But what if you're a nerd or a dork? You don't have any friends or family. You're not the popular kid. Your parents don't give a shit if you're being bullied. They're too busy doing drugs or getting drunk. What does that end up doing? How well does that actually work? Because going to the bully and telling him how it makes you feel, that just gives him more things to make fun of you for. No matter what comes out of your mouth, a bully is going to try to use that to fucking make you feel like shit. And when your friends are not real friends, and they know that you're being bullied, and you go to them, and they want to make any excuse not to even try. But when they complain, when they need help, you're there for them, aren't you? We've got expected gender roles that are still expected to be maintained by one gender but not the other. It used to be that what a woman brought to the plate was equality. You had to work, she had to work. Sure, she may not lift as much as you can, but you might get a wife who's bigger than you. You might be small. We know that a woman's selection process is a lot different than ours. There's certain things that'll take you off of most women's list, like being shorter than her. But there's still women who will date a man who's shorter. Your wife might be better at working in the fields. We've got those pictures of Russian women, big women out there with their husbands working in the fields, and you see some of them Russian women are picking up stuff a lot bigger and heavier than their husbands. We like to put this statistics and averages thing on every human being when there isn't a single human being who is average. Nobody qualifies as average. We're all different. Now, one of the things that I make sure I do, when I hear women complaining about men, I take note of the fact that they're complaining about the same things that men are. We are taught that the other gender is so much different. They're really not. Human motivations are the same. When it comes to who you date, that's only half your decision. You saying yes, well, if the other person never asks you, your yes doesn't matter. If you want them to ask you, many times you try to make yourself look more appealing. A lot of the men that I know were family-oriented. Were, as in used to be. When they dipped out, it's not like they dipped out into a dating scene of a whole bunch of sex. No, they dipped out entirely. They're not in the breeding game anymore. They're not interested. See, the women's sexual revolution of the 1960s resulted in women having a lot more options, but only some women. It actually took the options away from a lot of other women because there's these guys out there that'll hope that they'll get their turn. Now it's a turn-based scenario. My older brother, he often says, hey, you didn't lose your girlfriend, you just lost your turn. She got bored with you and she moved on. It happens. My older brother will have sex with a guy's girlfriend and say, hey, dude, it's your fault. You got too whiny. But then again, my brother has a different idea about sex than I do. Women do throw themselves at him like idiots. Some of my best female friends ended up not being my friends anymore over my brother because they thought he was dreamy and decided to stab me in the back and treat me like shit because my older brother fucked him and forgot him. Well, fuck you. I told you what he was like. You knew what he was like. Well, my older brother is asking you questions when you're 15, 16, or 17, like, when do you turn 18? Yeah, it's not like he's not projecting that he is waiting for you to turn legal so he can bust a nut in you. That doesn't mean he's going to keep you around. It doesn't mean he's going to save you for a relationship. You already knew that. You've known my brother. Nearly all of these girls who came up and told my brother when they turned 18. Have women done that to me? Yeah, but I don't care. My brother keeps on saying, so when do you turn 18? When do you turn 18? When do you turn 18? And then you come up to him on your 18th birthday and say, hey, I turned 18 today. How's he going to take that? And you know he's going to take it that way. So my older brother has no respect for any of you. And for me, I don't understand why you would disrespect yourself in such a way, other than the breeding thing, the sex thing, the he's more attractive thing. My brother doesn't mind throwing you away because there's going to be another addict next week going down there, getting messed up and trying to get a piece. Men aren't the only people who get horny. Men aren't the only people who make bad decisions when they've been drinking. There's a lot of us men, just like there's a lot of those women. A lot of those women that are not necessarily the 8, 9, or a 10 on your list. There's a lot of those women that just 100 years ago would have still been married, would have still had a husband, would have still had a family. And now they're in their 30s, 40s, and 50s going, hey, I've never had a boyfriend. Or I've only had temporary relationships until they found somebody skinnier, somebody prettier. And the same thing for a lot of men that would have had wives and families back then. Now it's the, hey, you're not the top 10%. Nobody cares. They still expect you to go to work every day and to provide for all of their families. We got a lot of single men who are going to work every day, paying their taxes, for a lot of single women with kids. Single women with kids who messed with that top 10% of men, ended up pregnant with one of those top 10% men, and those top 10% of men had options. They were able to leave and go find somebody else extremely quickly. Even registered pedophiles like Robert Franklin Warnick. He had all of his kids after he was a registered pedophile. See, birth control didn't make it so that nobody gets pregnant. Man trapping still happens just like it did back then. But it doesn't work as well today because you're not expected by society to get married to a person just because you got them pregnant. Man trapping is just a bad idea all around today, especially since there's DNA. It used to be that you could go out and mess around with all the bad boys and end up in a messed up situation where you're pregnant, and now you have to find somebody that might be a good actual father and hope that you can dupe them into thinking it's their kid. Well, you know what? That used to be a possibility. Today, you really have to dupe a guy into not getting a DNA test. You have to pick somebody who's such a poor, pathetic, broken excuse for a man that he'll believe anything that you tell him because he wants to believe it, because he doesn't want to be alone. He'll believe what you tell him because you're with him. You make fun of men who are desperate, who are supposed to feel sorry for women who are desperate. We're not supposed to make fun of them. Now, this breakdown of a family-oriented society is detrimental to all of us. We got party girls like my mom, who had kids and then mooched off their kids to make money off the government, off of a lot of other people's hard work. When I became an adult, I was proud to hit the workforce, to pay taxes to help a lot of kids like me, a lot of kids who grew up in the system like I did, who deserved a better chance, and hopefully paying those taxes would help them to get a better chance, but it didn't. Time for another coffee. Woohoo! I don't know why it turned off. Why do I always do that?
It happens. You're not the only one.
Well, it makes me feel like an ice hole. Hey, how do you catch a grizzly bear?
I'm interested.
You go out into the woods, right? And you dig a
The
hole.
woods first.
And you put some peas in the hole. And when the bear runs up to sniff the peas, you run up and you kick him in the pea hole.
Oh my God.
How do you catch a polar bear? You go out on the ice, right? You dig yourself a hole. You put some peas around the hole. When the bear goes up to sniff the peas, you run up and kick him in the ice hole. Right?
Yeah.
No, that's not cute. Here's a cute one. Knock, knock. Amos. A mosquito bit me. Knock, knock.
Is there?
Andy.
Andy, what?
Andy bit me again. You can tell that one a kindergartner.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I think my fur baby is very relaxed.
Oh my God. That's relaxed.
Her name is Familia.
Familia?
Yeah. Familia.
I named mine Princess Tiger Lily.
That's a good name. That is a good name. See you later.
Be safe. Absolutely. I
Is that the
decided.
same cup or a new cup?
I got a new cup.
You gotta take your cup, you'll see it.
Oh, it's still sitting in the car. I just noticed that I was talking to my phone for so long that it got kind of soggy bottom boys on me. And I'm no George Clooney.
You can dump it in the sink and then it'll be cheaper for you. You reuse the cup.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
I haven't decided what I'm going to do this afternoon. I'm either going to man bash or woman bash. It's weird. Oh, it is very aggressive. I'm trying to teach people about hypocrisy. It doesn't feel good when people say it back, does it?
You ever played 52 pickup?
I have. My Uncle Matt is the biggest jerk in the world.
We'll see you in a minute.
Yes, ma'am.
What can I grab you? Did I get a hot dog?
Oh. Speaking of my Uncle Matt, I should probably make a video and show people how to do the thumb check.